Hello, and thank you for joining the World Alliance for Arts Education to celebrate International Arts Education Week by attending today's webinar. Pretzel Theatre Collective, Youth Response to Globalization in Changing Times, will be hosted by 5 members of the Global Youth Theatre Collective. Now, please welcome the 5 hosts of today's webinar from the Pretzel Theatre Collective. Man Chung from China, Juliette Cottrell from New Zealand, Eva Knight from Canada, Joe Lee from Abu Dhabi, and Mark Pluckrose from the UK.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for WAAE and Creative Generation for making this happen. We had planned on presenting at a few conferences, and unfortunately they fell through. So to be able to have an opportunity to share our work with you is something that we're really glad to do. Just basically, I want to tell you where the idea came from, then talk about what our aims are today, and then we'll hear from the different people in the different sites. And at the end of the presentation, if you have further questions, we'll be happy to answer them as best we can. Just to begin with, I hope everyone has brought their pretzel with them. I think it's important. I know others don't take it quite as seriously, but for me, I think it's quite important because our starting point was when we were at the WAAE conference in Frankfurt, Germany, and we were partaking quite a lot of pretzels. And one thing we noticed with the pretzels was that they sort of just keep going around and around and around, and not in a neat way, but in a sort of twisty way. And this inspired us to think about how we could connect across the globe. We're all from all over the world, and we wanted to do something where we could connect the youth that we worked with other youth in a contemporary setting. And what we had been aware of is we'd been aware of other projects where they had connected people together and they were doing things live. But when we looked at our time zones, we realized that was going to be a bit of an impossibility. I was in Shanghai and Juliette's in New Zealand. So for her, it's now 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. For me, it's 9 o'clock in the afternoon. For Eva, it's 6 or 7 in the morning, something like that. So to sort of be able to connect people, we needed a model that was timeless. And that was part of the solution to the problem, was to work out how to use technology, but use it in such a way that we're able to transcend time and make sort of meaningful connections. Unfortunately, we got halted halfway through, so we weren't able to fully realize it, but what we were able to do was to do a proof of concept. So after having run it, and you'll hear from the different facilitators, teachers in their zones and from their own experiences, we're fairly confident that it can be taken up by other people, and not just other drama teachers, but also other arts practitioners. So one thing that we'd hope is that your takeaway from this is you realize how easy it is to do. It's not impossible at all, and also to hopefully see how we can incorporate other people. I'd love to see if we can get some music people, some dance people, and some visual art people to come on board and get involved, because I think that would add another really interesting dimension to it. In summary, the overall project involved 5 different locations, 5 different sites, and each of those sites had a group of students, and those students would create some kind of performance, video it, and then share it with the other 4 sites. Those other 4 sites would then take from that stimulus and create something new, and then send it back onto the next site. So the idea was that it didn't have to follow a linear structure. It didn't have to be class A, class B, class C, or site 1, 2, 3. It meant that if you had breaks in your term or breaks in your calendar that didn't match with other people's, which is what we found when we sort of tried to line them up, it didn't matter too much. It was more about just being able to bounce it back. And that's why we chose a pretzel rather than a donut, because a pretzel moves around itself quite a bit. So you can see from that we really are scattered all over the place. But not only are we scattered all over the place, but we also work in different settings as well. And we thought it was important to have representatives from different settings. So we have Joe is working in an international school. Mark is working at the Greater Torrington School, which is a more of a local school. Eva's working with a school that really doesn't have any sort of drama theatre support. Juliet's working at a youth theatre, and I'm working as an educational consultant for a series of schools in Shanghai. So we're all working with different sort of groups, and also very, very different, I guess clients is the right word for it. And for those of you who might be interested, I'm working with a group of ESL students. So for my students, English is not their first language, which created another challenge. But if you are working with students that are not native English speakers, for whom English is a second language, I would highly recommend getting on board, because it was fantastic. It was really, really good, even though we only managed to do a little teeny tiny bit. This is just a little summary of the school I was working with. We managed to introduce the work to them, and then we kind of got shut down in Shanghai, I think well before everyone else did. So we were planning on starting after Chinese New Year, which would have been in February. Unfortunately, all of our schools shut down in January, and we haven't seen them since. Our schools were, students at my school were low socioeconomic group, pretty low English, and fairly poorly travelled. So most of them hadn't been out of Shanghai, or let alone to other places in the world. So we thought it was a great opportunity to do a project that was intercultural and would also be something that would help them with their English language. I'm now going to throw across to Mark, but if you have got any more questions about my part of the project, I'll be happy to answer them at the end. Mark?
As Matt said, I'm Mark Rose from Great Torrington School in Devon in the UK. I'm going to be talking about how we began to create Pretzel performance in anticipation of any responses from other countries. All of the Pretzel pupils here in the UK took part in the programme within their drama curriculum. All of these students had chosen drama as an option. They were studying the RSL Level 2 Certificate in Performing Arts. They're a group of 30 English-speaking, mixed-gender, 13 to 14-year-olds. So, as you're aware, Pretzel Theatre came out of the WAA conference in Frankfurt last year. We recognised a unique opportunity at that moment to create something which could meet the goals of the Seoul Agenda, which you can see there on the screen. At the beginning of this process, we identified a need for Pretzel pupils to introduce themselves to each other so that they could feel connected. Our aim at this point was for the students to find value in what they were about to embark upon, and feel some real empathy and friendship for those that they would go on this journey with. We decided for their first introductions that they should realise that they had common interests, common preconceptions, and that rightly and wrongly we share these globally. One of our roles as practitioners would be to help them to walk that line between correctness and censorship when setting up a global relationship. We needed to make sure that this collaboration was built in a manner that would foster positive values and positive relationships between the students. We also discussed between us the building blocks for any performance response between us and the other practitioners. Our role was also to be a facilitator, to gather evidence together, their responses together, and pass them on to the other Pretzlers around the globe. We therefore set about the task of creating an introduction video for each other. This could be any combination of images, audio, text, and video. To help us all get started, we provided each other with a list of preconceptions that the pupils had about the other countries. You can see on the left there on the screen are the preconceptions that Canada sent, and they were the first country to send any out. They listed some of the things about the UK, that it always rains here, except in a pandemic-induced lockdown, though, apparently. We have lots of war artifacts, that we drink tea and crumpets. We have the best chocolate in the world, strong cheese. Excellent frosty drinks. We have accents. We have a queen, and we don't like the French. It was really interesting to hear their first response to these preconceptions. There was lots of discussion and disagreements about tea drinking and the weather. They seemed both slightly offended and a bit proud at the same time, which was really interesting. What came out of this was a response where we began to put together a simple performance piece to reaffirm or dismiss these preconceptions. In small groups, I asked them to choose 3 preconceptions, then place them into a sentence. So, for example, many people think that we drink tea. We totally agree with this. Or many people think we don't like the French, when actually most of us really don't mind them. They were then asked to create some dynamic still images to accompany these. This was a simple and effective response, but what we really wanted to do was get to know the other Pretzel pupils and for them to get to know us. So we decided to play some international drama games. It's what we're good at. So we chose One Truth, Two Lies. We played this with our first group. In the game, one person presents 3 stories to the group. After they've heard all of this, they discuss which one they think is true. The group can also ask questions about each story to ascertain its authenticity. So, for example, when I was 8, I got stuck in a treehouse and had to be rescued by a fireman. When I was a teenager, I swam with a shark in Florida. 3, the first time I went parachuting, I cried a lot. I'll let you ponder on which one you think the truth might be. I personally think it's a great game for imagination, improvisation, developing an excellent acting poker face, if you like, as we're required to maintain a pretense there and then on the spot. So in groups of 3, the students agreed on 3 stories about themselves, narrated these with actions. Our job was, as a class, was to judge the level of detail and believability in each one to determine the truth from the lies. We filmed these, we shared them with our new global Pretzel family to play along as well. I think the most exciting part of this whole process, though, for the pupils seemed to be the anticipation of a response. They would always come into the lesson, and the first thing they would ask is if I'd had any messages or any videos from other countries. They were very curious about other pupils' experiences and facilities within their drama educations in other parts of the world. So before sending our response, we forwarded on our own preconceptions. These included that Canada's money's colourful, they like to drink maple syrup, they play ice hockey, they've got Justin Bieber and Shawn Mendes, they're not too keen on Americans. In China, they said that they must have lots of factories because everything seems to be made there. They have lanterns, dragons, great food, lots of markets. New Zealand, they have Greenland and sheep, it's hot there, they have strong accents. They do the haka and they're really good at rugby until we beat them. Lastly, in the UAE, they speak Arabic. It's very hot there. They have desert oil. It's very rich and it's very religious. So I did find it interesting that I didn't need to guide the pupils to kinder responses. Most of their comments seem more factual than anecdotal. I think the other Pretzel practitioners, they found the same thing as well. So it was great to see. So it was great to see that the pupils were going to start this process with open arms and minds. It was the ideal platform to begin to explore global perspectives and viewpoints with empathy and shared values. So I'm going to pass over to Eva now, who's going to talk to you about those next steps in our process.
Good morning from Canada. It's a little early here. So what was really interesting about Pretzel Theatre in Canada, in the school that I was in, is that there was no drama program at all. I was new to this school. This school was a brand new school that had just been opened the year before. In a new neighborhood in a rural setting. There was no plan to have a drama program. I was actually hired as an elementary and music teacher, but I thought, what a great way to help build the community in this school through a drama program and to really build a global community and start building connections with these kids. There were a lot of challenges to overcome just because of the newness of the school and the absence of a program. There is a beautiful drama room in the school, but it's been utilized as a sports storage space, and there was nothing there. No theater blocks, no props, nothing. So we're really starting through from scratch. The other hurdle I had to overcome was that none of these students had any drama background at all. These kids actually, there weren't a lot of extracurricular programs that any of them had been involved in. In Canada and Alberta specifically, only art and music is mandated for curriculum up to grade 6. And then after that, you don't actually need to take the arts necessarily. So I was dealing with kids who had no drama background, just trying to get them to do a tableau and stay frozen for a moment was challenging, as well as trying to get kids into the program. They didn't know where the drama room was. They didn't know who I was. So initially we had 45 students who were interested in the program, which was great. And it was in the middle of winter, so they really wanted to stay inside at recess, which was excellent. But what happened is this program actually had to occur at lunchtime, which was only 42 minutes long, and they had to eat their lunch in that time. And so students were finishing up their cooking class, trying to come upstairs. They're middle school kids, right? And they are really connected to their friends. And if their friends decided, I didn't want to come today, then they didn't come today either, right? So at the onset, we had 45 kids. I had 45 permission forms. I had 8 boys to start with. And as you can see from the picture here, we ended up with sort of about a group of 12 girls who showed up week after week. A couple of them who would say, oh, McKenna is down just finishing her cooking, I'll go grab her, right? So we had kids running in and out of the room to try and grab one another. So the core group that you see on this slide would really be the Pretzelers that took part in developing the preconceptions and trying to learn, taking their first steps into drama and theater through Pretzel Theatre. And I would agree with Mark, anytime they came into the room, it was, are we going to do our video today? Have we heard anything? When we got our video or our preconceptions from Shanghai, I remember one of them was, it gets cold there, like -10. And that day it was -32 with the wind chill. And so they were like, let's send a text message to Shanghai. So we were sending messages to let them know, yeah, it gets cold, but you don't know what cold actually is. So like I said, because the program was new, and I was in a rural situation, I really wanted to showcase the diversity of Canada. Canada is a very diverse nation. We pride ourselves on being multicultural, and yet what I was getting in my classroom in the program was 12 girls, all about in grade 6 and 7, so about ages 11 and 12. There is a large group of First Nations students at our school, and I was really hoping to include some of them in this project because I really wanted their perspective. that it just didn't happen. I think as well, we didn't have any boys, right? And I think that really spoke to, in the rural setting in Canada, what I've learned is there's still that hurdle of men in theater or boys in theater and in the arts. And part of this, I really think, was because there hasn't been a drama program at this school, right? And so trying to build that program and build a community where it's safe and it's inviting, it needs some more time, and we're working on that. Once again, I was coming in as a classroom teacher, not a specialist, drama specialist. So the school only had a music specialist, band specialist, right? So the kids didn't have a robust arts education. The lack of time was a big factor. And so because of all these things, what I decided to do, and was in the process of doing, was actually opening up sort of Canada Part 2, which was going to a local community in Calgary, which is a city of 1 million plus people, and actually starting up Canada Part 2, where I knew there was going to be LGBTQ students who would like to be involved. There was refugees who were wanting to be involved in a practice like this, and having a larger range of students. Not shutting down Pretzel Theatre in the school, but just being able to get a different perspective to share with the world. And we were just in the process of starting that when Alberta shut down. So when we get to Act 2 of Pretzel Theatre, which Man will talk about at the end of the presentation, we're hoping to have a more robust representation of what Canada really looks like. And now I will pass this off.
Ko te wānanga whakare o te mātou a Māui tiki tiki a tāranga te ropu. Whai a mātou te awa hatanga, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everyone, I'm Juliet from Hawke's Bay Youth Theatre. That was our Hawke's Bay Youth Theatre Pepiha, and I just basically told you about our mountain and our river, the name of our group, and a little saying about ourselves, which is we pursue creativity. So I'll refer to the Hawke's Bay Youth Theatre as Habit. Habit is a performing arts school for young people, an after-school fee-paying program, which also offers scholarships, free scholarships to a small number of students. I'm not currently there, but we are from a regional town on the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. It's a place of orchards, wineries, and creativity. What more could a drama teacher want, really? It's isolated. It's in terms of its access to professional live theatre is limited. It's growing, but it's not great. And here in Hawke's, or there in Hawke's Bay, venues that would normally we'd have access to, and access to touring performances have been closed for some time, not due to COVID-19, but due to earthquakes. So the Opera House has been closed for 4 years due to earthquake strengthening, and our own venue as well was closed for 3 years because a fire ripped through it. So our response to that was to start touring with our groups to main cities in New Zealand, and also to Sydney and Brisbane in Australia. And it's a tradition we started in response to the fact that we had nothing happening in the region, which we're hoping to continue. And pre-COVID, we had some loftier ideas of going even further afield, but we'll see. So the good news is that our venues opened just before the lockdown, and we're just waiting now for the nod to recommence in person. New Zealand is on their 6th day of no cases of COVID-19, so we're heading in the right direction. So the group, the Pretzel group that I've been working with is we call it the development group. They go on to audition for the main company, and these kids are aged 13 to 15 years. You can see them there sitting on our Mona, which is Te Mata Peak. They really hate that photo because they said they look dorky, but I think they look really cool. They have been, a lot of them have been doing drama with me for about 4 years, or with one of our other teachers. And I've said there that drama is their stability in a sea of hormones and uncertainty. These students are no different to any other group around the world who have found their tribe, as they call it in drama and theatre, the place where they can be themselves, or at least try out other versions of themselves. And we try to expose them to as many people working in the industry at all levels as we possibly can. So I'm going to talk about what they responded to in terms of goal 3 with the sole agenda. And I think all of us Pretzel facilitators really thought that that climate change was going to be the top one. And it wasn't at all. The myths around what my kids said was bullying was a big one for them, and that these myths around zero tolerance to bullying, the responses and the approaches to this were from schools. They were very, very cynical about. They were also very cynical about school approaches to anxiety and depression, and things like man up and take a concrete pill. These kids just aren't buying that anymore. And another thing that they talked about were the barriers to well-being, being one of them being the school system. Social media was big there as well, and as well as toxic masculinity and discrimination of all types. Those are the things that really matter to these kids. We were really fortunate to be the recipients of both Joe's and Mark's videos. And after the initial ones, after the intro ones, also from Eva, Joe then sent this video, which my guys were beyond excited about when we received it. It was the same deal. When are we going to see something? So what I decided to do there is, and you can see I've actually superimposed the image on the big screen, but the image is there of the video, the first scenes that Joe had sent. And we decided I froze it at the end and asked them to just study it and identify any characters that they felt they could relate to or were interested in finding out about more. And it was fascinating to watch them, because they looked at it as if they were in an art gallery studying like a painting. And it was so much more effective than if they'd been looking at it on their phones. And that was one of the things I was going to get them to do, but decided to use the big screen that was in the room. I asked them to choose a character, recreate that character in front of the big screen, step into the scene. And we talked about what their characters were doing there, why were they there. We seemed to come up with more questions than answers, which is the beauty of drama, is it not? And through a tap and talk sequence, explored what might be being said. I was fascinated that nobody chose that central character standing there, and I haven't really asked them why they didn't. May have had something to do with not sticking out. Anyway, what we did then was we explored what each of the characters might be saying or thinking. We brought it to life, we filmed it, and then sent that to Joe in Abu Dhabi, and suggested they be monologue starters for her group. It was sort of like a big game of, and then this happened. And then we waited for their response, but I think that by the time you got them, school may have just closed, Joe, I'm not sure. Something else that we did with that was the very beginning of the scene, and this was entirely student driven, they wanted to present an alternative way of thinking, and that they wanted that whole scene to be reworked, which they did. They reworked the initial scene and played it back by turning it on its head and switching the peer pressure part of it to have a more positive spin. So that went back to Abu Dhabi as well, but I'm not quite sure what happened then. The other stimulus that we responded to as well was from Mark in the UK, where they had chosen a number of articles and sent a few through to us. And the one that really resonated with our kids was actually a climate change one, which was about a small coastal town that was disappearing in the UK. And immediately our kids said, that's Clifton, which was is a small coastal town in Hawke's Bay that is literally disappearing due to climate change. And they also said, we've had enough of being filmed, but you can record our voices, which I did. So I just literally, they created some dialogue, and I just literally walked around and recorded their voices, which I don't think I've even posted on our Google Drive team. So that's where we got to. We were watching from afar, really, when as each country closed down, and it was like, I remember walking in one day and one of them saying, "You've not got more bad news, have you?" And it was just so sad to have to tell them that, well, this is closed down, and we made the decision in the end. I think we were the last to close. So yeah, that's New Zealand Pretzels.
It is an absolute privilege to be part of Pretzel Theatre. I get the joy of building upon what everybody else has said. And I'm very lucky because of the time zone that I actually have a number of my Pretzel pupils who are watching at the moment and who are here to comment and share ideas with you. Pretzel Theatre at Cranley, Abu Dhabi was very different to the situations that a number of my fellow pretzel practitioners found themselves in. For us, as you can see by the pictures, and that you'll see by the videos when they get sent to you, along with this recording, you will see that our facilities are excellent. We have a very beautiful theatre that we're very proud of. Drama is part of the curriculum from year 3, so age 7, all the way up to age 18, and is very much a core part of the school. We were able to offer this as part of our gifted and talented programme. That is, that we invited pupils who are already within the school community. We had drama scholars, we had drama GCSE pupils, we had performing arts scholars, we had pupils who had already been involved in a number of school productions. And this was really an opportunity for those pupils who were absolutely passionate and dedicated to drama to come together for an added extra beyond the school productions, beyond the drama clubs, beyond the various things that we are so deeply, deeply lucky to offer. And I build upon and absolutely endorse what everybody said about the excitement of the ideas that were shared, that waiting. I was also stopped in corridors to ask if we'd got a video through. There was one point when I was actually, as in a completely different capacity to drama, was asked to go and observe an Islamic studies lesson, and was in the middle of observing a colleague when a pupil turned to me, and I thought he was going to share the work that he was doing, and had actually completely ditched the lesson and was saying, you know, have we had the video? Which I was like, yeah, but you know, get on with your work. And it was just fantastic to be able to see the work that was being shared. I know that some of the Pretzel other practitioners found the video that we first sent to be sort of slightly intimidating, especially in terms of the lighting that we were able to use, the theatre space that we were able to have, the fact that the pupils were to be in their uniforms. We discussed, did we want to get changed? We discussed then they discussed, was I going to provide them with specific pretzel t-shirts, at which point it was like, no, we'll just stay in the uniforms. The other question that I got was I going to provide pretzels for them to eat at the start of every rehearsal? We had them once or twice, just to celebrate good work. But it was such a joy to be able to come together and to be able to support these ideas. I also entirely support what others have said about the maturity with which these huge themes were handled. When you look at the Soul Agenda, which I hope that you will once you watch back this presentation or do your own research, but the concept of social and cultural challenges facing the world today, those are some really big words. And it would be very easy to think that pupils of this age should be sheltered from that, or should be in some ways might not be interested, or might want to pick something that was slightly more frivolous. And absolutely not. If you go back to the work that Mark was talking about before and that Juliet built upon, when we were discussing what did we want our theme to be, and it was entirely up to us. We didn't have to have the same theme throughout the world. We could have picked our own theme and then sort of use different extracts from other people's performances in order to build our performance. That was entirely our choice. But they were gritty themes, and this was not pushed by the practitioners. This was absolutely, what do you want to explore? And it was, it was huge. At the time, there were fires raging through Australia. We thought that climate change would be high up there. Of course, it was discussed. But what we came back to was the concept of well-being. And we were looking for something that was universal. There was also Brexit happening at the time. We are a British international school, and that was very high on the agenda and discussions. However, what we wanted was something that could really be a universal theme. And so we settled on well-being. You will see when you get the footage, because we will send footage out, Creative Futures will send footage and videos with you when you receive this presentation and the recordings. You will see examples of the work that we did, of the soundscapes that were created, and of the visuals that were presented at the end that Juliet's group got to perform. And Juliet is absolutely right, because right at the end, just at the point when we were finishing, we were able to see New Zealand's response to the work that we'd done, saw that reversing of the negative into the positive, and were so very moved by that. And the final task that we actually did under remote learning, and will be shared with this, was pupils who were invited to take the last line of the New Zealand monologues and use that as a starting point for our own monologues. And what was fascinating was that it meant that they didn't have to be the character that they had shared with the other Pretzelers. They were then jumping to a different character and were picking the the finishing line from the New Zealand performance and using it as their starting line. And it was, it was just fantastic. And of course, this was what was quite heartbreaking about it, because we were just at this point of sharing all of this when the school was shut down. And when we were shut down, we were straight away put into a 2-week break. And the first thing that was cancelled was the co-curricular activities. And then, and then we've just come out of Ramadan. So during that time, our school day has been reduced even more. Thinking about Ramadan, though, one of the great joys, as Mark had said before, and Man had said before that, was the ability for flexibility within this concept. It didn't matter that New Zealand had a really long, what's their summer break, our winter break, and we're coming back to school at the end of January. It didn't matter that in China they were about to have a longer Chinese New Year holiday. It didn't matter that we would, during Ramadan, not have an opportunity to share our work. That was always going to be the case, because within our structure, within our beautiful pretzel, where things are sort of twisting and turning and not having to go around in circles, it wouldn't have made a difference to the other schools, because if we couldn't share, somebody else could have done. And I think that's the model that has made this so very successful. We were discussing the other day that obviously this concept of using digital theatre is not a new one. People have been doing this for many, many years. There are many platforms that you can tap into and pay for in order to get their resources. However, what we were doing was the equivalent of passing on a note to somebody else, writing the first line of a story and handing it on, and not being able to control where that story would go. And in a world where we are so very, very keen to be able to create things, to be able to show things, from my side, the listening and the responding was the most beneficial from this project. We could not dictate where New Zealand were going to go with that. All we could do was make an offering and see where it led. And then when we got back, then respond to that. And of course, this is something as theatre practitioners we know about and is so important, but it is so wonderful to be able to see that evolving and for it to be happening so very naturally within these young and incredibly impressive pupils. So speaking of these young and incredibly impressive pupils, I had many yeses from people who would like to say a few words. So Avia, would you just like to give us a sentence or two about how Pretzel Theatre was for you?
Hi, everyone. So for me, I've been doing drama for a long time. So it's a different experience to do it with people from like various different age ranges. And so when there's people younger than you talking about these like really big, dark topics, it's inspiring to hear their perspective, but then also to know that they grasp the concept and like they understand and are willing to make a change and put their ideas forward. It's just inspiring to know that, I guess.
Thank you, Avia, so much. Victoria Alexis. I'm just going to tell everyone, Victoria Alexis, that actually you're the one stood up in this picture, so everyone can visualize.
Yes, I am. So my experience with Pretzel Theatre was really amazing, and I hope it doesn't stop here, because like I've been doing drama with you, Miss Lee, since year 6, so that's almost 4 years now. And I've been in so many things to do with drama, and I absolutely love it. I'm going to be doing GCSE drama next year. And so, like, this was an amazing opportunity for me. I absolutely loved it. Like, when I got the email, I was straight away replying, Miss, I want to do this. This sounds amazing. And just being able to collaborate with international countries and not just within the UAE is so amazing.
Thank you so much. Hugo was the young man who was in the middle of the picture, who nobody chose to represent in New Zealand, and as a Year 11 GCSE student was one of the oldest people within our group. Hugo.
Pretzel Theatre was just an incredibly fun experience to have, to really socialise with all the younger year groups you don't really get to socialize with in school. Being a senior, you're very worked up in all your work, and so having this time to be able to, you know, bond with all the younger years, get to know the people in the school around you, was just really nice and really opening to how many people you're able to get to know through drama.
Thank you, Hugo. So yes, I think it was the fact that we had pupils from Year 7 all the way to Year 11. So we had that collaboration both within Pretzel in Abu Dhabi as well as connecting across the world. Thank you. Sama.
Okay. I feel like just because like I've known Miss Lee since I was 6 now, so it's almost been like half my life, and I've been kind of like growing from her for a really long time now. It's a very informative opportunity. It shows you how far you've grown in the years that you have done drama, and it shows you what you want to be, because I'm one of the younger people there, so there's so many people who are older than me, and they kind of teach me and they show me what I want to become, and they give me like a point where I want to like grow to, and I think that really helps just kind of with the understanding and like the knowledge that you get. It's a really nice, like a good experience.
Thank you, Sama. Can I also ask you, before we let you go, you were one of the people who during remote learning did a monologue performance responding to New Zealand. Could you just give us a few lines about the character you created and the choices you made?
I feel like because they flipped it over and they were trying really hard to make it more positive, and we started on the negative side, I kind of tried to make mine a little bit in the middle. So it started off not as like happy, as before, but then it kind of went into like a more happy and like it's like almost getting better. It's almost like the phase where you're trying to like understand yourself and you're trying to like be one with yourself. And I feel like that was really fun to try and like understand that person's feelings, because I'm lucky enough to not have had any of those like feelings or like vibes ever really. So yeah, it was really like eye-opening.
Thank you so much, Sama. And the last word will go to Katie.
Perfect. Pretzel Theatre was an amazing experience. To be able to work with people who I wouldn't choose to spend my day with, who were maybe older or younger than me, was amazing. And to get to know them more, it was a brilliant experience. And to see what other people thought about us without knowing us. Before we started filming everything, we had to write down what we thought their assumptions were about us. And for them to come in, we had some that were the same, but there were some that weren't the same. And it was amazing to see what other people thought that we were and what we were like in the country we lived in. It was just an amazing experience overall.
Thank you so much, Katie. Okay, well, that wraps up the section from Abu Dhabi. We will now hand back to Man for the closing.
Thank you so much, everyone. I mean, I've been able to hear sort of bits and pieces of everyone's sort of progress and challenges and things as they've gone through, but it's really nice to sit down and sort of hear it all put together. I just want to acknowledge that our program in Shanghai couldn't have happened without the support of Pansy in the school, the Guanming Middle School. They were fantastic because in like all the schools, they've all got sort of different challenges. And one of the challenges that we have here in China is the obsession with exams and exam drilling. So I was very, very fortunate that I was able to find a partner in a school who was willing to, also understood that we can help our students to do really, really well in the exams by liking what they're doing as opposed to just getting drilled by it. I guess some of the takeaways from listening to all that was how student-centered it is. It's very, very student-centered in that we provide the framework for what the students do, but ultimately the students were choosing which way they wanted to take it, and they were telling us what was important. And that's something which you can then piggyback all the rest of your learning on. You know, I mean, for us, it didn't really matter if they were doing climate change or they were doing well-being or they were doing bullying. What we wanted them to be articulate, thoughtful, creative, and critical thinkers, and to develop those skills. So instead of giving them a theme or a topic which was, set by us, which may or may not have been relevant to them, we opened it and allowed them to make those choices. And what we ended up with was a far, from what I can gather, is a far deeper engagement where kids were actually excited to get involved and going out of their way. I mean, one little thing I was doing with the students in China before we got shut down is my students were a little bit similar to Eva's in that we didn't have any previous drama experience. We had teeny tiny rooms without sort of any sound baffling or anything like that. So it was like little concrete boxes with real crazy echo and stuff in there. We had close to 40 kids that were there, and they weren't self-selected. They were put into that class. So some of the kids wanted to be there, some of them not so much at the start, but then I was trying to give them the foundation language skills and the foundation drama skills before we really got stuck into the Pretzel Theatre thing. And one thing that I thought was really cool was I didn't give them any homework to do. And they went away, and these are kids with really, really poor English, and they were off writing their own scripts. And they were then editing those scripts in class after feedback. And that was coming all off their own bat. So it's not just the social or the cultural or the issues and things, but it's also the upskilling in a whole range of sort of cognitive and linguistic areas as well, which I think is really, really important. The last sort of 2 points that I want to make before we open the questions is, personally, as a practitioner, I found it really nourishing. I found it fantastic to be able to share practice with these beautiful people who were working at my level. So I wasn't dealing with admin above, and I wasn't spending, you know, my whole time working with kids who was kind of, you know, under you and learning from you. But I had an opportunity to work with peers who I respected, and were doing fantastic work, and, you know, were coming up with things that I would never conceive of. But I was also able to bounce things back to them that would help them. So I really felt it was a really nurturing environment, even though we didn't get to do much of it in Shanghai. But the planning stuff for it was making me, as a teacher, a facilitator, look forward to what was going to come through next on the message, what was the next part of the project, and I guess I refer back to Sue Davis, who's a great drama writer, but she talks about dramatic thinking. So rather than thinking about things in terms of an economic model or thinking of things in terms of discourse, we think about things in terms of drama. And when we think about things through drama, whether they're issues or topics, then we're using our body, we're using our affective response, as well as our cognitive and our intellectual response to analyze and feel what was going on. I mean, one of the things that really struck me was when Juliet was working and China had been sort of shut down, and her kids had come up with the notion that they had to be sensitive about what they sent to the Chinese kids, because they didn't want them to feel bad about the virus that was happening over here, and that showed a great deal more maturity than a good proportion of the world leaders on how they decided to deal with COVID-19. And you know, even though we never got to see those sort of messages, it was beautiful to see what happens when you trust kids and when you give them a framework to express their ideas to the world. Jeff, I think that's me. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Joe, Juliet, Mark, and Eva. What we'd like to do now is we'd like to start planning for Act 2. And instead of getting chased out of the building by someone pulling a fire alarm, we'd like to get it through to the final performance and see where that can go. So we're opening up our contact details and hoping that either you or people that you know might be interested in hosting a Pretzel hub, if you like. And if you are interested, or you know someone who's interested, copy down our details, shoot us a message, and we can start talking about how we can make this work for next year.
This brings us to the end of our time together here for this webinar. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, and thank you especially to our speakers for waking up early and staying up very late. We wish you all a very happy International Arts Education Week and look forward to seeing you online throughout the celebration. Thank you very much for attending.